Here we are in a brand new creative world, looking at, what will hopefully end up being something amazing in the future. I'm starting this series, Noob Vs Axiom, to try and learn this mod so that I can create custom biomes in a fantasy style world that really just reshapes the overall feel of the world into something a little more fitting to my style. And if you like how this first one looks here, this is an example of just one of many ideas that I have currently, and I'm going to be using Axiom to try and make life a little easier and kind of push the limits of what I'm able to do, and hopefully eventually do a survival series in the world that I end up creating. So here at first you can see I mess around with the color picker, just kind of seeing. I'm not even very experienced with Minecraft as far as things go, so I'm not sure what blocks go well together yet. I'm kind of using color picker to try and come up with a gradient idea. I know I want things to sort of transition from a brighter orangish color to more of like a dark navy. I really wanted the end goal to be skulk, but I mess around with gradients for quite a while before I kind of land on that. And I spent probably a couple hours going through the color picker, refreshing different blocks. For a while I was kind of thinking maybe instead of skulk I should end up on mud. So I'm transitioning, trying to find a way to take it from orange to mud and then from mud to skulk. I don't know if anyone has kind of done that transition before, but I would love to see if anyone has a nice, smooth way to do so. After messing around with gradients in the color picker for quite a while, like I said, I probably spent a couple hours messing around with all of these to try and land on something that I enjoyed. You can see I still can't quite make up my mind. I really was trying to go orange to brown, and mud had a nice little brown to gray kind of transition, or brown to black kind of transition. I was thinking I could kind of bridge that gap, but a lot of the browns, they vary in saturation a lot, and I couldn't really get anything I was happy with, so it took a while. After kind of messing around with different gradients, and once I decided this was a decent enough start, I started messing around with different tools, kind of seeing what a couple of them do. Spent a lot of time adding my block choices from the gradient over to the palette in the gradient section. I didn't realize that was just to kind of store your block choices for like a hotbar. I thought this would actually apply all of these to the actual gradient tool when I used it. So lesson learned there, that it's nice to be able to grab your block choices quickly, but also kind of a waste of time if you don't know how it's actually used. Then I started actually building up a mesh, kind of modeling out a shape that might be usable. I was trying to figure out what some of the different tools did again. Here I kind of decided like, oh, maybe I can chisel away at this and kind of sculpt it out some. I was getting a little frustrated that the ground wasn't like masked out of this. I don't know if there's a nice way to mask how you use the tool. You can see I adjust a few different settings to try and modify the threshold of what's actually being modified, but it's improving, but it's still not solving the problem I'm trying to solve. And later on, for more complex sculpting, it definitely would be helpful to be able to entirely mask a selection of what I want to edit so that the rest is not destroyed in the process. So if anyone knows a way to actually edit just a certain thing and not others, that would be greatly helpful if you can help me out in the comments. Then I tried to clean up my mess a little bit by smoothing things back out. I don't know why I thought because I had the active block on the right side selected as grass that it would just flatten as grass and not what was actually below the area I'm trying to smooth. That might also be a setting I'm just unaware of, so if you do know, let me know, because I instead just ended up copy and pasting some grass from the other flat area over here just to kind of fill in my mess, and there's still a hole underneath it, so there might be a better way of doing that. Then going forward, looking through different tools, not really sure exactly what I want to do. This is where the little saved gradient kind of came in handy. I was able to drag things in, so I guess it wasn't a complete waste of time, because I did end up utilizing it instead of having to pop up a search menu for every single block. It was already done. So I could see how that could be useful if you needed to do this over and over again. It's definitely better to just be able to click and drag instead of searching it up every time. Further messing around with the gradient tool, I was trying different ways to use it here. I couldn't for the life of me figure out how it was actually applying the gradient. I was confused why it didn't start with skulk and why it was just slamming orange all over the ground until I tried it a few more times. I started to kind of pick up that it was based on your draw length there. Then I discovered after messing around with every different application mode, you know, based on player position and everything else, I kind of landed on the fact that I just prefer using the sun angle. It works a little bit more straightforward in my opinion, and I messed around with different angles after thinking it was based on the time of day, like the actual angle of the sun. I didn't realize I could just drag these sliders, because I actually was changing the daylight to be directly above my object, but realized I don't have to quite do that, and I was finally getting all of the blocks I wanted to show up, and I just adjusted, you know, some of them so that skulk would be a little more prevalent than a lot of the other ones, and I wanted less of the brown, more of the orange and the blue to kind of stand out the most in this. So you see me tweak that a little bit here. I was just taking a good look at this, trying to decide what wasn't making me happy here. Really, it's just those brown tones are just not really cutting it for me. I liked the darker colors. I liked the orange. So I was trying to find a replacement. I ended up swapping a couple blocks and ended up a little bit happier with the less of the brown in the transition to begin with. You see me double checking the colors here, really just trying to find alternatives that might fit. I believe I swapped from mangrove wood to muddy mangrove roots, and I think that really helped kind of blend things together a little bit. Now that I had a gradient I was actually happy with, I was starting to mess with shapes. I wanted to come up with something that was actually interesting to look at other than just this big blob of rock that I sort of quickly made here. So I cloned it out a few times so it'd have like a few different pillars of detail. I really probably should have rotated these or edited them a little bit more so they weren't all literally identical. Then I start sculpting in other pieces. I realized it was still set to grass there, and I ended up fixing that, and then continuing along, using some different sculpting tools, trying to just get, I wanted like a, kind of like a Western American, you know, if you've ever seen photos of like Zion, or if you've ever watched Cars and seen radiator springs, or, you know, some of those sort of examples, the more canyon style rock formations. I really wanted to go for that sort of feel, because the main idea for this biome in my head is that it would be a cave found beneath a desert biome, or I guess the story behind it in my head is that it's what used to be a swamp turned into a desert, and this is the part beneath the surface. So you'll kind of see that sort of come to life as we go ahead. I don't know if there's ways I want to improve it later, but I think overall the idea came across how I want. So that's what the sort of shape I'm going for is, like I said, is kind of desert themed. You can see me trying to put in a ground here. I was really banging my head against the wall here. I don't know why I did this the way I did. I could have just made a flat platform instead of trying to get this model out here that I was going for. I think originally I was trying to do it this way because I wanted a more organic shape as the base, as opposed to having a flat plane, but you'll see I sort of fixed that a little bit here. So after messing around with a couple different tools, I end up figuring out I can at least extrude this to make it a little bit better from even the extrusion I'm doing probably the most tedious way possible. Now I'm looking through being like, okay, is there a better way to do this? Because that setting isn't working how I want. Clear my selection, make a new one, and then I'm like, okay, I can do it like this. So still not the best way. It gets better and better. You can see I'm just copy and pasting at this point. I could have just made a big square selection and then changed the material type. Would have been even better than that, but it got me where I was going, at least to start with. Then I wanted to try and, like I said, I wanted it a little more organic, and I was messing with different brushes, and I really like this, how this would kind of variation in the angle. So it made things rigid, made things a little spiky, and I could kind of go around and just roughen up the edges, get a bit of a shape in here. I do kind of wish I had cleared up the corners of the build, and I also kind of wish, I'm not sure how to exactly do it, but I wish there was some deeper divots in the water itself. I don't really like that it's all one big flat pond, which if you didn't know it was going to be a pond, you will. You do now, or you will in a moment. But from the preview, you know, I assumed everyone had picked up that there was a big pond of water there. Now we have some sort of a shape here. I'm I'm mostly happy with it. Like I said, I would have liked to have cleaned up the corners a little bit, added some more variation to the depth. You can see now I'm trying all sorts of different ways to kind of get the base that I want before I fill in the water. I had a big flat area of, what is it, sculk, and going from there, I'm messing with different selections and stuff, trying to figure out, okay, how can I apply water to this? I start to color the surrounding area. I'm applying the same gradient as before, and I start popping it to the actual terrain that we've generated now, and I am loving seeing the color. There's a good amount of blue, there's a good amount of orange, and now we're moving on to trying to add the water, and just after attempt after attempt, different methods every time. Each of these, like one of those was fluid fill. I don't even remember what the other tool was, but it was just not working for me. And then you can see here, I just did a simple block fill. I made a big selection and replaced the air with water. That was giving me a preview I was actually happy with. So I kind of tweaked the selection and the height of things, and I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to move forward. So going from that, this was the easiest solution I could find. I'm really not sure if there's a better way to use like the flood fill tool or the whatever the water simulation tool is. That I could not figure that out for the life of me. So then I went forward with this. I had the water in here and I wanted to start adding some lighting. The big thing about this biome is that I really want it to glow. Like I said, it's supposed to be subterranean, underground, like a sunken area beneath a desert. And I want it to be like a hidden oasis, but I also want it to be, because it's underground, a well-lit area, like somewhere people would actually be able to live. So this is a good example of kind of trying to get that glow effect in the dark. I swapped it to nighttime to kind of see how vibrant things were. I spam pickles around and bone meal around to try and get some more lighting and some more foliage, just to kind of give it that lit up oasis in a cave kind of feel. I was starting to be pretty happy with how the glow looked, but I realized a lot of the terrain was really hidden, so I peppered glowberries all over the place. Then I sped up tick rate real quick just so I could see them grow in, so I didn't have to run around and bone meal everything I just placed. And I was really happy seeing the orange glow mixed with the blue and the water and everything. But I wanted even more lighting, so I kept adding different elements that could help light up the area. And I thought some little glowing crystals would be really cool. I've never built with glass panes at all. Even in my Minecraft house builds and stuff, I don't really use panes. So this was definitely a learning experience. Here's a little snippet to kind of show off where we've made it so far. I was kind of happy with the glow on the top of the crystal. Added a nice little pop of blue to contrast the orange. Let me know what you think about those. I was getting really annoyed with the little dynamic light gizmo here. It was following me all over the place. I didn't really know how to turn it off, and I really needed a light source in my hand to see half the time, but also was placing a lot of them, and that was just always in the camera, and it was driving me crazy. So yeah, I was really starting to hate that thing. So I was going to ask you guys for help, but I ended up actually figuring it out the next day. So you'll see I went through every single setting. And after clicking through all the different settings and actually learning a few things that I didn't know existed, I discovered that there was actually an entire list of settings not showing on that list. And they're actually tied to the little red toolbox down at the bottom. And in there, you can enable and disable some different settings, one of them being marker entity gizmos. And that's how you get rid of that little guy. And then going back to trying to light up the area a little bit more, the water being the only bright source of light was still kind of bothering me. So I was making some mushrooms and I wanted to try and make different size ones. I ended up making this medium to large size one, and it was awful. So I even blurred it out because it was so bad I didn't even want to show it off. And these guys, they were a little taller than I wanted, and I really liked the simplicity of just a skulk sensor on an end rod. I do think that having the fence post there was kind of neat to elevate them at a different height. I might add that back later, but the trapdoors just weren't vibing for me. So I sprinkled around just the little stubby ones, turned this little corner into a fairy ring of sorts, and added some more crystals to the space, and was really just kind of cruising along at this point. I wanted to see what this would look like all lit up entirely and how the ideas that have been formed so far would kind of come together. So we just kind of started cruising along. I did have a few crystals come out where from certain angles they looked pretty good, but if you looked at them from a different angle, they might look pretty terrible. That's definitely something I got to figure out. I need more practice with glass. You see, like I was thinking this looked okay until I backed up from an angle and realized it looked really boxy. And so I start chiseling out different corners, giving it a little bit of a better shape. Realized it was too tall and ended up, just kind of doing that through all of the crystals, trying to make them look as good as I can. Ended up relatively happy, again, for never really building with paints, ended up pretty happy with how they were. Then I was looking at the end rods again, and I realized it was really blaringly white, kind of gave me like laboratory vibes from my shader pack. The skulk veins actually dye the color of the lighting a bluish tint. So I went around and I surrounded every single one with some of the skulk. Then the final detail I was really looking to add to was just to get some more variation in the water. I was happy with the amount of light, I was happy with the color, but wanted a little bit more life in there to really push the oasis feel. So I spammed some lily pads around, and inside the lily pads, I kept adding the amethyst skulk sensors. They add a nice little tiny light around them. You see they kind of glow themselves, the amethyst does, and also the little pops of purple look cool. So here we're kind of approaching the zone as if we're walking through a cave, and this is where we ended up. I think overall I'm really happy with it. This took me a good few hours, and I've learned a lot, not just with Axiom and Minecraft, but also with, editing all these clips and this video in general. I've never really done video editing before, so this has been a long learning process, and I'm learning a lot of different mods between Flashback and Axiom and, all the different tools. So let me know what you think, and if you have other awesome biome ideas, I'm really going for the magical or fantasy kind of theme. So if you have any sort of mystical biome idea, let me know in the comments. I'd love to maybe try and tackle your idea, and maybe I can help bring it to life or expand upon your idea to give you a new one. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, subscribe, whatever to engage here, and let's make some ideas together and come up with something cool. And let's learn how to use Axiom. Thank you. Enjoy.